it's 2:30 and I guess we can get started. And I hope half of you aren't going to leave because you're waiting for your transportation. That's what happened last year. People were sitting in here waiting for their transportation halfway through the talk. They walked out on me like, oh. And here I thought they were sitting here wanting to listen to me. I trust you guys. Okay. But I'm Claire Golembewski. I'm with the URI Master Gardeners. And the commercial first, the URI Master Gardeners' mission is to learn so that we can pass the information on to others. So this program is being brought to you by URI Master Gardeners. And we do speak in several libraries and venues throughout Rhode Island and sometimes even in Massachusetts. And since I'm from Massachusetts, that's fine. So why would you want container plantings? Why would you even want to mess around with containers? What's the use of them? Containers are movable. They can be placed anywhere. They can be in an area of a paved area, an impervious surface to soften up an area. They can be moved around to follow the sun. They can be changed around very easily. They can go vertical as well as horizontal. This is an example of what you can do vertically. This is actually, actually on sale downstairs. The Attleboro High School kids have their plants downstairs, and they have a couple of these. It's an example of a vertical planting. I have seen a very effective planting done along a wall with all of this type of things. There was absolutely no room for a garden down on the ground, but all of these were up on the wall, all different types. It was breathtaking. It was amazing. And that's what you can do on decks. You can do that on porches. You can do that just about anywhere that you can set some kind of container down. And what kind of containers can you use? Well, use your imagination. And in a museum, there are plenty of people with a lot of imagination. This is the traditional planter. Not very deep. You wouldn't want to put vegetables in here because vegetables use at least 12 inches. They should have at least 12 inches of growing room. But there are a lot of shallow-rooted flowers that you can put in here that would thrive very well. The nice part about containers is if you don't like it here, you can change your mind, and it's a lot easier than digging everything up. And don't get me wrong, I have a lot of perennials, and I dig, and I move, and I change. You know, like some people change furniture, I change plants around. But they're extremely movable. This is another very common type of container. You can have several of these in a row. You can paint them at the Daggett Farm at Slater Park. The clients there paint their pots. They've got beautiful decorated pots over there. You can use something as simple as a peach basket, and you can use the things together. For height, you can put a couple of containers, one on top of another. I intend to plant something in here. It's a little distressed. I could not carry any water in here anymore. It served its purpose for that. It's now become a decoration. I intend to put flowers there. I can even, no I can't. On a lot of the watering cans, you can screw off the rose, but this one has been permanently attached, and put plants right in there. I think this would look lovely with nasturtiums coming out of them. And I've even seen them hung this way so that it looks as if the flowers are pouring out of the watering can. Extremely effective. So I've seen an old boot being used. The toe is kind of distressed, it's open, and the flowers are planted in the old boot. It looks gorgeous. You wouldn't think, there would be an extended life after your garden boots or hiking boots are, but they're absolutely gorgeous. So you're limited only by your imagination and the drainage. You need good drainage when you have container plants. That's one very important thing. Also, you need to be careful what you put in the pots. Okay, how would you plant the things? First of all, you wouldn't use something like this from last year. I haven't cleaned it out yet. It still has soil left in it from last year. It's a good example of what not to do. There are probably pathogens, soil things, little unfriendly things in the soil that you wouldn't want getting into your planters this year. What you would do would be to clean your planter out, and then you would use a solution of 1 part bleach to 10 parts water. It's not going to harm your wood, but it will sanitize it so that once you put the soil inside of it this year, you're not going to have a lot of problems left over from last year. So the first very important thing is to have a clean container. Whatever you have, you want it clean, you want it sanitized. I didn't bring any clay pots here because they're heavy. I have to carry all of that, but a clay pot is the traditional great container. However, if you plant in a clay pot, you have to remember that it dries out very, very fast. And when you're putting new soil in a clay pot, what you want to do is soak the entire pot first. Get the water in the clay before you put the soil in it. If you put the soil in it and then try to water it, the plant is going to absorb the water from the pot. The soil will separate from the edges of the pot, and you're going to have trouble because you need to have the pot completely filled. You don't want that space in there. So soak your terracotta pot first, and then put the soil in. And when you're talking about soil, in a huge pot, a really, really big pot, you first of all, you don't want to use garden soil. You don't want to use the same thing that you would take out of your garden. It's too heavy. It defeats the purpose of having a very movable plant thing. And you don't know what's in that garden soil, and plants in containers are a lot more susceptible to everything than a plant in the ground. A plant in the ground can sustain a lot more than a plant in a container. Compost is an excellent medium to use. Sifted compost, once you sifted that, it's light. It's generally the right pH. Now, I don't know if I have to explain pH to you, but I'm going to go over it very, very quickly. Your gardeners, most of you know about this, but it goes from 0 to 14. The ideal pH for most plants is between 6.2 and 7. Lower than that is acidic. Higher than that is alkaline. And now's the time to put in the commercial for the soil testing that we're doing Sunday. Right here in the library, we'll be testing soil. Compost generally comes out right about neutral. It's funny, you can put oak leaves in there, shredded oak leaves, that people say very acidic. You can put shredded pine needles in there. You can put a lot of things together in your compost and it comes out very neutral. You sift that compost. It's a wonderful medium for your pots, especially if you have the great big pots. And I've planted, I run out of garden space. I have 7 raised beds for my vegetable garden, and I run out of space for things. So I have containers, and they're starting to line up the edges of the paved areas, and pretty soon we'll have to park out in the street because I'll be taking all of them over. Now, this soilless mix that I have in here is an ideal medium for the smaller pots, for starting your seeds, for starting your plants. It's called a Pro Mix. I'm going to pass it along. It's probably much too big a container. You're all right with that. But it's a medium that has no soil in it, holds the moisture well, and it's a little bit expensive, but I know that you can get it at Farm and Garden, Attleboro Farm and Garden. I know that you can get it at Briggs. It's sterile, so you're not going to have any pathogens in there to begin with. And some of you are probably very familiar with it already. In fact, I believe that's what they're using in the children's area out there for the little ones to plant their seeds. But something like that is very, very good for putting house plants. It's the only thing I use to put my house plants in. It doesn't have any fertilizer, so you have to add it once the plants are established. You have to add fertilizer to that, but it doesn't have any other problems either. It's great. Now you have a big pot, something like this, and you don't intend to put your vegetables in here. This is a nice size for vegetables. Even carrots will grow well in something like this because you've got the 12 inches here. And if you use a soilless...
With that soil?
What was...
doing vegetables, would you fill that all up with that soil?
I would fill it up with compost, actually. I use my compost. I have 5 compost bins, piles, whatever, 5, 6, and one of these 2, and because I experiment with all the different types of compost bins. And for vegetables, I would fill this entire thing up. The nice thing about it is if you've ever planted carrots, you know if they hit a stone, instead of being like this, they're like this. Thank you. You get when you have the soilless or the compost that you've sifted, you're going to have the nice straight carrots. You're going to have, because they're not going to have the interference with any of the things in that you hit in your regular garden soil. But yes, for carrots, for vegetables, the 12 inches, you would fill the entire thing up. However, if you're planting flowers, shallow-rooted flowers, you don't want to waste all of that good compost or all of that nice soilless mix, expensive soilless. When I say expensive, just to give you an idea, a bag about, well, a cubic something or other. It's about, is it a cubic foot? I think it's bigger than that because it's as high as this table and it might go 12 by 24 by 24. I mean, it's a good sized bag, but you'll be paying about $40 for it, in that range, $40 to $50. It lasts for a while, depending on how much you... so you don't want to waste it all if you're not going to be using it all. People used to say, well, put the peanuts, the packing peanuts that you get from any packages you get, that's messy. That when you dump it out in the fall, you've got all of those peanuts in it. One thing I learned to do was put the peanuts in plastic baggies, seal the baggies, and you've got that in there. And when you dump it, you've got one container instead of having to sort through all of that and all of that plastic. Other things you can put in there, more packing material. That's not hard to take out. You know, the stuff you get, the water bottles that are everywhere. You shouldn't be buying water in water bottles anyway. It's no purer than the water, no, another commercial, than the water you get from your faucet. But empty water bottles, plastic bottles at the bottom of it, so that you just fill up the top of the pot. That's all the soil you need for these shallow plants. Okay, what can you plant? First of all, let me check this, make sure I'm getting everything covered here. What can you plant in containers? All of this over here, just about every vegetable can be planted in a container. Last year, I had a couple of containers about so big, and I planted potatoes in them.
Oh, wow.
Put compost in the bottom, and then I cut up the seed potatoes that I got. Don't use the ones that you get from the grocery stores. Most of them are treated, so they won't germinate properly. But I got them from one of the garden stores, and I put them right on top of the soil. I filled up the planter halfway full. I put the potato eyes. You have to have sections with at least 3 eyes. And I put them in the pot after I dried them for a couple of days so they wouldn't rot. And then on top of them, instead of putting more soil, potatoes grow up. They grow over the roots, not down like peanuts would. So they grow up, which is why you have to hill the potatoes. But I filled it up with shredded leaves instead of other soil. The roots are down in the soil. The potatoes are growing up in the shredded leaves. So in the summertime, you can kind of cheat and feel your way around and find the potatoes that are a good size and just take them right out and let the others grow. And my husband one year asked me why I would plant potatoes. I think they were 59 cents a pound or something at the time. Why would you ever plant potatoes? They're not expensive. Well, it's like saying, why would you plant green beans? You know. So that year, once I harvested some of them, I cooked them up, and I was going to cook the rest of them up for Thanksgiving because I have a big gang for Thanksgiving. He wouldn't let me use those potatoes.
laughing so much.
He wanted them for himself, and I didn't have to say, you know, na 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 na. That's why we do it. We could, I mean, you can taste the difference, but that's the same as harvesting strawberries, or, you know, the difference between getting a strawberry in the store and picking them warm right from your garden. I mean, if anyone has ever, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So now this year I won't plant potatoes in those pots because you have to move your vegetables around so that the bugs, the things that attack the potatoes this year, and are probably waiting and saying, okay, dinner's coming. Well, potatoes aren't in that section, and that's why you should rotate in your garden, and you do the same thing with your pots. I'll follow them up with something else, maybe green beans, and I'll make a teepee so that they'll climb up the pole. Or, yes?
What about the squirrels?
How about those furry little rodents? Yes.
They were eating my neighbor's red Christmas tree lights.
Oh my goodness, they're.
We
Well,
caught them doing it.
They are the cutest, and they're great at problem solving. But when they start making holes in my house, and I have several birdhouses that no longer have the hole that big. It's about that big. When they start destroying my things,
They're not cute anymore.
no, they are no longer cute. Squirrels, you can use screens, but then you defeat the purpose of having these pretty planters out there. I try to plant enough so that whatever they take is their share, and unless they pull the plants out before they even produce anything. My daughter had that problem with chipmunks. They would come and eat the little tiny plants so that nothing else would grow. I don't mind sharing, but they have to share too. And we have to use extreme measures if they don't share. I usually plant extra, but you know, squirrels. Ever heard of a have-a-heart trap?
Yes, I have.
All right.
I know. But who do I hate enough to let it go in their neighborhood? That's the problem.
Oh, well,
Well, true.
Take them for a long drive.
Yeah.
ours go swimming
I gotcha. They like to, okay, good to know.
in a big rain barrel. Okay.
Yep.
My husband was keeping count one year of how many. You know, you can't transport them. It's illegal to transport them.
Is it?
But there's nothing illegal about drowning them. And I mean,
That's crazy, isn't it?
and you know, I am an animal lover. My daughter is vegan. We treat all animals nicely. However, when they are destroying my life,
Absolutely.
but the traps have worked very well.
Okay.
And as long as they're outside and they're not bothering what I am doing, they're fine. And they're smart and they solve problems.
They do.
But when they start being destructive, you know, it's them or me. That's okay. Yes.
Like cats and possums and those, like, they bother you gardens too, or?
We get possums, we get skunks, cats not too many. You know, if they eat the whole tomato, that's fine. If they take a bite of one and a bite of the next one, Yes, uh-huh. You know, like, this is not a buffet, guys. You know, eat the whole thing. But unless you have everything in one of these chicken wire fences with a roof on the top, because the birds come and they take their share too. And as I said, I share, but yeah, the critters, you have to, you know, have a little, but you have to live with them too. We don't have deer. And don't believe that anything is deer-proof. There are things that are deer-resistant, but deer, if they're hungry enough, will eat anything at all. You just plant things that are deer-resistant and hope they find your neighbor's garden more appealing. Yes?
I back up to a national park, don't plant red. They will leave every yellow, any color tulip, anything, they destroy my red. And I've red in two
Red?
areas. It's
Oh.
always red.
You're in danger. You have that red shirt there.
On these containers now, will you keep them in the sun most of the day, or do you move them around when you're growing vegetables? How much sun will you vegetables?
For vegetables, you need at least 8 hours of sunlight. Yes. So they should be in the sun. However, in some of the containers, you may want to plant coleus or impatiens or something like that. Nice shade plants. You can move those around. If you have an area that's shady and you need something there to soften the area, to make it look prettier, make it look more appealing, then you would plant the shade plants. I mean, there's a plant for every place. And as we often say, it's to the point of redundancy, right plant, right place. And I've made plenty of mistakes with the wrong plants. The good thing about it, though, is that with containers, okay, not good here, you put it there. You know, it's an important thing to remember when you're planting containers is put the plants with the same needs in the pot. You're not going to plant a succulent or a dry plants that like a dry environment, along with say impatiens that are under there, water me constantly. You want to put the plants with the same needs in the same pot. So the shade-loving plants would go in one pot. And if you make mistakes, big deal. I mean, it's easy enough. A container is so easy. It's easy enough to move it around, to pull it out, to switch it around. Before I forget, this is something that the Attleboro High School kids do. It's their lettuce, mesclun, whatever, pot. They put spinach in them, they put lettuce, they put all kinds of herbs.
Now, will that get bigger, though, as you water it?
These, well, they pick them too, I mean, this is all edible. Right. The entire thing is edible, and they will get a little bigger, but that's okay. In a container, you're controlling the environment. You're putting the water in, you're putting the fertilizer in, and containers, since you have that soilless mix, do need fertilizer. So a very weak solution, and I like the natural, the fish emulsion. What I use personally is worm tea, worm castings, because I do vermiculture. And that's composting with worms. The leftover, after they've digested it, everything, can be harvested out and just kind of broadcasted on your gardens. And then the worm tea, which collects at the bottom, there's a spigot at the bottom of my vermiculture thing. I dilute that and I water my plants with it. It's all very safe. It doesn't burn the plants. You have to be careful. You don't want to put too much fertilizer in it and burn the plants. But a very weak solution, a couple of times a week, will work very well, keep your plants healthy. Now, containers dry out faster than your regular garden. They say on your regular garden, you want to have at least 1 inch of water per week. And if you get the rain and you get 1 inch, well, fine, you don't have to water that week. But containers, good way to check is to stick your finger inside and kind of wiggle it down to your first knuckle, about 1 inch down. If it's dry down to there, you want to water it. And you want to make sure that the entire plant gets watered. Some tricks that some people use to keep it watered is they put a smaller container inside the larger container, and they put gravel around the outside, and they water the gravel. If you've got your pot set in there, the water will continue without your having to spend a lot of time daily. You know, if you go away for a weekend, you don't want to have somebody come over and tend to your plants. One thing you don't want is to make a lot of work for yourself. So make it easy, use the easy ways. Another thing is soil moist. That's a substance. I still don't know how good it is for the soil, but I'm told that it is very safe for the soil. And it feels like granules, but when it gets wet, it feels like Jello. It holds the water in there, and slowly it gives it out. It gets dry again, and but it holds the water for a long time. So if I go away for a week and I've got soil moist in there, I know my plants are pretty safe. I have, the only thing about it, this is a caveat, and I've heard much more experienced gardeners than I am say they made the same mistake. They put it in the soil first, and then they planted the plants above it. Well, what happens when this stuff gets wet is it expands, and I've had plants pushed right out of the soil. But I have had very experienced gardeners tell me the same thing happened to them. So put the plants in first and put the soil moist around the plants so that the water will not, when they expand, the plants won't be pushed out of the soil. Now, when you're making arrangements in your pots, and I got this from my friend Lee here, who's also master gardener, she said you should put a thriller, a filler, and a spiller. So you have a tall plant in the middle, because you're going to be viewing this planter often from all sides, unless you're up against the wall. So you want this nice big thing in the middle, something to fill it all in. And with containers, you can pack things in pretty tightly, and then something draping over the side makes a very lovely arrangement. Okay.
Let's see.
What would be an example?
Like what you would, if you were going to do that right now, what might you put? Grasses,
Yes, some kind of one of these grasses in the middle, not those that grow, you know, extremely high, but a grass that might grow 2 feet high. Please?
Fountain grasses.
Fountain.
Well.
Lee says the fountain grasses work well, and then you could have nasturtium coming over the sides. Those are always lovely. And you get the foliage that is attractive as well as the flowers. With annuals, well, you'll have flowers most of the time, but if you put perennials in a container, you want the foliage to be very pretty too, because the flowers will go, but the foliage will be there for the entire summer. And if you have a perennial in a pot, when you overwinter it, what I do, I mean, people have a lot of different things. They'll put burlap around it. They'll try to insulate it. I have a part of my yard that I call the nursery, and I put all the plants in that area pretty close together because in the ground, the roots are insulated with the rest of the ground. When they're up above the ground, they're very close to the outside and very susceptible to frost. So I put them close together, and then when I shred my leaves, I pack them in between the pots and around the pots. And most of my plants survive very well that way, because you're not getting all the exposure that you would to the frost. They're all, you know, in their little leafy blanket, which is very nice. And you don't only have to put plants in here. You can have water features in containers. You can have containers that run out into another area. You can plant a few water plants. You can have a goldfish in a container to take care of any of the mosquito larvae that get in there. But you can have a pretty little water feature along with your plants in your whole arrangement. Okay. That's just about most of what I have to say. If there are any questions, yes?
What about drainage?
Drainage. You have to have good drainage. The most important thing that you need for in a container plant is good drainage. Otherwise, it's going to get terribly mucky in there. The biggest problem with a lot of plants is overwatering. You need to have the drainage. I mean, something like this, the water will drain out. What you can do in something like this is put a plastic so that it just comes out, you know, the bottom instead of all around. If you use wood, you don't want to use wood with a preservative in it. I have had people make raised beds out of the pressure-treated wood, and I tell them, you know, there's arsenic and other ugly things in that wood. Oh, well, there's not that much. I said, that's leaching out into your raised beds. Your people are getting vegetables with that junk. What's the use of planting vegetables if you're going to, unless you don't like them very much and you're trying to poison them. But no, don't use wooded, preserved wood for any containers. Redwood is good, cedar is good, it won't rot as much. Something like this, I'm not sure what this is. It will eventually rot, most likely, but you'll get a good many years out of it. I have some plastic, look like terracotta containers that fit right on the rails of my back porch. Beautiful place to plant herbs. You know, I'm making a salad, I'll go out there and pull some parsley and basil. They're so versatile, so movable, that you can do so much with whatever. Use your imagination. Yes?
When the plastic containers get hot from the sun, they don't leach chemicals though?
Well, you're not having anything very acidic in there. Remember, you're putting stuff, the soil in there that's neutral. So the plastic won't leach the way it would, say, if you put a tomato sauce or something in there. That's a good point, though. Since we tell people that the plastic bottles leach chemicals into the water, I'll have to do more research on that one. Maybe I'll tell people, no more plastic containers. But yes.
I just have another question too. If you're using the fish emulsion fertilizer, how long before harvest should you stop watering with it?
Well, actually, the fish emulsion, you don't want to use that inside. You definitely do not want to use the fish emulsion inside. You use it outside because there is an odor. And I'm not saying aroma. Aromas are nice. There's an odor. You know, it smells fishy.
The vegetables take the taste?
No, they're fine. I have never had a vegetable taste fishy. But as I said, I use mostly the worm castings. The only fertilizer I use throughout my entire yard is, compost, which isn't really a fertilizer. It's a soil amendment. It just adds organic matter to the soil. And the worm castings. That's mostly what I use. Every once in a while I'll use a fish emulsion, but I use, the very organic type things. I've never had any problem with anything tasting wormy or smelling wormy either. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, it wasn't exactly an hour's talk, but thank you very much for being and